I think we can start the session. It's 5. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to CLLE's panel discussion. The search for better teaching strategies and construing better learning outcomes will never end for teachers and educational institutions across the world. Contextually, today's panel discussion will be a deliberation on perspectives around building students' competencies, learning disposition, building a culture of inclusion and equity, and most significantly, the role of practitioners, school leaders, institutions of excellence in developing an ecosystem and a transition to competency-based learning and education. So before I venture into the discussion itself, let me introduce you our panelists. Mr. G. Balasubramaniam. He is the Chair, Advisory Council at CLLE, a thought leader in education. He was a former Director Academics of CBSE Delhi. He is a passionate teacher, teacher trainer, curriculum designer, mentor for various educational institutions and leaders across the world. He has to his credits few 100+ articles on various subjects published across several magazines. He has authored a number of books for teachers, educational administrators, and school leaders. He has served on several committees on education, both at the national and the international level. Currently, he is the chairperson for the Board of Advisors of International Council for School Leadership, Delhi, consultant at Grey Caps and the Teacher Tribe World. He brings his extensive experience and wisdom to propel various learning initiatives, partnerships at CLLE as well. Welcome you, sir.
Thank you.
We also have Mr. Vishnu Agnihotri. Vishnu is a co-founder, chief learner, academic director at GenWise, which offers unique enrichment programs to school students. He is a pioneer in gifted education and talent development in India. He has vast experience in both education and business domains. He has worked as a vice president at Educational Initiators, where he led the asset development team. He was also an academic director for the asset summer programs. Vishnu has an engineering degree from IIT Madras with over 30 years of national and international experience, more than half of which is in the field of school education. Vishnu is deeply committed to investing in skills, capabilities in and providing context and exposure to the gifted, talented children of today to enable them to be the leaders of tomorrow. He has been an academic director for India's leading residential program for gifted students as well. And of course, he also has a deep background in education assessments. We welcome you, Mr. Vishnu, to the program. We have Mr. Rishikesh BS. Rishikesh leads the Hub of Education, Law, Policy located at Azim Premji University. His research interests are in the domains of educational policies, assessments, teacher education, etc. Having completed his schooling and undergraduation in Bangalore, he went to Jawaharlal Nehru University in New Delhi for his higher education and specialized in ancient Indian history. He currently teaches master programs at Azim Premji University. The courses which he has offered is in the history of education and educational assessments. Prior to his present role at the university, he has also been an educational researcher for over 2 decades. Of this, he has spent more than a decade with Azim Premji Foundation. In fact, it has allowed him to engage with the educational bureaucracy as well as teachers across more than a dozen states in India. Over the last couple of years, education policy related issues has formed the core of Rishi's work. He is on various government advisory committees on issues concerning education, particularly in his domicile state, Karnataka. His field activities are primarily through workshops on educational research, deliberations on issues related to teacher education, and a variety of engagements on education policy discussions. This element of practice and the engagement with theory in the classroom environment gives him the balance that he strives for between theory and practice in his work. He regularly writes for various publications on issues and challenges related to school and higher education. We welcome you, Rishi.
Thank you so much.
To start the panel discussion, panelists will be given 2 minutes each to make an opening remark about the topic and the relevance of CBL, that is competency-based learning, in the context of today's expectation from the learning and the learner's perspective. The guiding question for the same remarks will be, what, in your opinions, is the relevance of competency-based learning in the context of learning and our learners as we prepare them for the future, please? So if Vishnu can start the session.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I think one of the fundamental issues is the divide between what is being learned in schools in the school curriculum and what people are doing in actual life. So let me take an example. So some months ago, we were asking this question to a whole bunch of students. It was in a course on data analysis. And we asked them that this movie Manikarnika had grossed 48 crores by day 4. So what can we say about the financial success of this film? So answering this question requires one to look at comparison with various benchmarks. So for example, you may want to know how other films have done by 4 days, or what was the cost involved in making this film and so on. But interestingly, even if you talk to maths and statistics toppers, leave alone in schools, even if you ask college graduates and postgraduates this question, many of them will not be able to think clearly about this. They will actually start thinking, oh, 48 crores sounds good, or something like that. And this to me is a divide. So a person who's not necessarily trained on statistics or maths may actually think quite clearly about this, because it is a sort of a common sense thing. At the same time, having learned that statistics, maths should actually help you to answer this question better. So in my opinion, actually most of the school curriculum is quite relevant. Like some people who say that school is not necessarily, or the curriculum is, not good. I actually don't agree with most of them. I think that a lot of the people contributing to society strongly today have been through a very similar curriculum. The issue is that there is a divide between what is learned in school that seems to be only for cracking exams, and the people actually don't have the students don't even expect this to make sense in life. So I was in a government school in Rajasthan for a couple of days, and there was one child, his classmates were saying, sir, this guy is flunking, is not good, this, that. And as the conversation went further, we realized that the boy actually was very good. He actually had repaired in that village a mobile phone which nobody could repair by taking out the speaker from a toy and putting it there. So as we go on in this conversation, I would fundamentally like to talk about the divide between this cracking exams and school learning and what people do in real life. I think both are important, and I think getting this the theory and practice together and meshing all this together is very important.
Okay. Rishi, can we have your views on this?
Thank you. Well, I mean, I would begin by saying that can't disagree with Vishnu at all on what he shared. To add to it, given that we are today discussing CBE or CBL, it goes with different tags. What I think is important for us to understand is that yes, the curriculum is in place. But also whether what is it that we take out of the curriculum to uh, to bring into our classroom experiences, and how is it that we decide on these aspects. That's something that we need to think about, because when there are curricular goals, then why is it that when we do things in our classroom, it's very different? Why is it that our focus is so much on the content? Why is it hence our pedagogic approach of a certain kind, which we know does not really enable learning in a manner that it can actually be applied later on to real life situations? So this goes back to this fundamental question of what from this, as Vishnu said, good curriculum that we have, good curricula that we have, because even across many boards, I think we have decent enough things in place in the name of curriculum. So that really is the big question for me. And when you look at what's really happening, it is about how is it that we are presenting the curriculum. And also given the fact that after we draw out the syllabus and then we create a textbook from the syllabus, as to how finally we just get completely wedded to this particular material and do not even look out beyond the textbook, which is where we are completely deviating from the curricular goals and landing up into a situation wherein we are getting ourselves stuck, right? And that's really where we are hence not able to ensure that competencies are not focused upon. If you really look at the curriculum that we have, let's say at the CBSE level, we can take many other examples as well, but this is something probably many of us would be familiar with. You will see that the curricular framework, which was developed in 2005, based on which we have the curriculum today, is as comprehensive as it could be, and all the competencies that we speak of, which we today probably call as 21st century skills, can be located in the curriculum that has been drawn out of the curricular framework 2005. But why is then what's happening in our classrooms very different from what is envisaged in the curriculum itself? So these questions, I think, are the ones that I would like to engage with today when we talk about what is competency-based learning and how different is that from what we already do. Do we have the required framework or required curriculum, required syllabus? So these are the things I think it's very useful and important for us to deliberate upon. Thank you.
You're on mute, Nagamani.
Thank you so much, Rishi. Bala sir, if you can share your views with us.
Well, thank you, Dr. Nagamani. I think both Vishnu and Dr. Rishi have really focused and highlighted some of the most relevant issues with regard to the competency-based learning. Personally, left to me that the acquisition of a competency is not necessarily an outcome of a textbook or a learning, material, learning resource. As was pointed out, a very interesting question by Dr. Rishi, that you have got an excellent curriculum in 2005 and the learning objectives and the curricular objectives have all been defined. Then why is that not happening around, and why the children are not getting the kind of competencies that are enlisted in the documents over there? Possibly that comes our practices in education, which are more concepts. In other words, our focus has largely been on preparing the children for a defined goal of an examination over there. And even our examination system focuses on knowledge domain exclusively rather than examining the skills, proficiencies, and competencies which have the outcome of the products of any good learning, right? So whether it's a formal learning in the school or an informal learning in the school, the major outcome focus of any learning process is to acquire a competency, if not a mastery over a particular skill over that. So I think we need to, it's time that we reflect on the processes, namely the pedagogy, the systems in the classroom over there, which are more inhibitors to the enhancement of the competencies. In this context, the schools very often say we are helpless because that's exactly what the parents want. At the end of the day, the parents want the child to pass an examination, get a mark, 90%, 100%, and then into any other competitive examination. So our entire focus, social directions to the concept of education has been, out of focus, right? So long you don't empower children with competencies, with what little they have learned, is not that how much they have learned, with whatever little they have learned, if they have kind of a competency in that, I think we have done the job. So my focus on competency-based learning is that it's time that we focus on restructuring the kind of pedagogy, the kind of preparation of children to the realities of the curriculum rather than the purposes of an examinations, because mostly today examinations have become a farce. They do not indicate, leave alone the competency, but even the basic knowledge or the skill domain of the children. I think that's a very important thing we need to discuss, whether it is a classroom, a pedagogy, or is a social consciousness on behalf of the parents. That's my view.
Okay. So from the divide between the school curriculum and what is the real life scenario to, enabling learning to preparing students only for exams, or is it necessary for us to concentrate on building 21st century, skills in students? I would like to ask you a very, very basic question. What exactly is CBL? What do you mean by competency-based learning? And how does this actually manifest inside a classroom? Any one of you can, answer this. Rishi, would you like to go first? Yes.
Sure, thanks. No, I saw Vishnu and Mr. Balasubramaniam unmuted, so I thought one of them could go quicker. So thank you. Let me just say a couple of things and leave it to both of them. I think when we say CBL or CBE or the various other titles we use for it, we should understand that we are talking about a gamut of things here. It's not just about the curriculum or just about a certain kind of a pedagogic approach. It's a very holistic kind of an educational endeavor that one is talking about, where the focus is that we are looking at children acquiring certain expected competencies through the various kinds of engagements that a teacher and the student are having in a given classroom situation. And the focus, as Nagamani ji you said in the beginning, is on equity. So it's about acquisition of competencies on at one place, and then it's also about ensuring that every single child in that environment acquires that, and that would be the responsibility of the teacher. Now, this would also mean that the assessment patterns will have to change from what we otherwise know, which is usually one standardized format that we would have, and ends up with a summative exam which will decide whether somebody has acquired competencies or not. Now, even that will have to change if you're truly looking at ensuring that CBE is in place in what we do in our schools or in our classrooms. So in that sense, it has multiple linkages to what we do as part of our schooling process. So definitions are very difficult. I would say that there can't be a very single definition that all of us would agree to. But I think in terms of foundational principles, there could be many of these on which we all of us educationists would probably have a consensus. So to just conclude here, I would say that many of us, in fact, already are in the CBE paradigm. It's just that we don't call it that. And, one can very clearly see where good education is happening. In fact, there is CBE in place, right? So I'll leave it at that. I'm sure Vishnuji and Balasubramanianji, you both would be able to add further.
So, yeah, maybe I'll share something quickly. So I'm not, I've been more a practitioner in education. I'm not a researcher or a scholar. So I would like to take the analogy of, so if you take music or sports, I think most of us will realize that we will not expect children to learn music only mugging up saregama. What is the difference in frequency between sa and pa and so on, right? We will at some stage pretty quickly get them to sing a song or do something like that. And similarly with sports, right? We would expect them to go out and play basketball or whatever it is. But somehow that idea has not gotten into the math and science. So to me, that is competency-based learning, where, and I'm not talking about real life application necessarily, right? I mean, there can be a lot of competencies developed without any real life application. So I could enjoy math, do a bunch of things and so on, play around with numbers, and I could be developing competencies. I'm not applied to anything. So somewhere I think, and I don't want to get into why this is happening, and that's later in the conversation. But to me, competency, and I think Bala sir and Rishi have talked about it, right? That this being overly obsessed with the textbook, the portion. So we've created something nice. Many of these textbooks are pretty good also, right? For example, after 2005, when the social studies textbooks came out, and then I think later some of Rishi's colleagues, I think Aman Madan and Alex George, brought out this small book called How to Teach Social Studies. They had to write a book about how to teach what was there in that textbook, because even that beautiful textbook was being used again in a mechanical way. So somewhere there is a mindset issue. And when we go further in the conversation, we'll have to talk about this, because I think while we can talk about specific competencies, I think the larger competency is just a mindset about learning, that whatever I have gathered in terms of knowledge or skill, that something can be done with it. Unfortunately, people are thinking that the thing which can be done with it today is to get 90, 95, 99%, and then, get a government job or this job or that job. And that's the core of the issue, actually.
Well, I think both Dr. Rishi and Vishnu have highlighted a very important aspect. While Dr. Rishi spoke about that there is no specified norm for a competency, because competency is basically contextual and depends on the individual ecosystem of the learner and the social ecosystem. And Vishnu really spoke about how the achievement level of the students are being linked to the competency, and he used the word what you call the mindset. I think I would like to synergize both what they spoke, in the sense that when you come to the pedagogical process in a school system, in the learning, we are now creating in the children a mindset for performance. And what is that kind of mindset? Mindset is for achieving in examination, not the mindset for learning, right? When you talk about mindset for learning, it is an open-ended mindset. As a matter of fact, two things personally, being in education for the last 50 years, which I have felt as skilled in the Indian education system. One is what is called your 33% marks over there. So the moment a child is said that you pass with 33%, you accept 67% of incompetence. So we need to let children perform what they could. And the idea of minimum levels of learning, people say, while it addresses the issues of equity, at the same time, we also need to address the areas of excellence. Therefore, it's very important that we should also encourage maximum levels of learning as much as we encourage the minimum levels of learning. So I think the Indian education system has been very closed system, where the parental needs have been met, where the needs of the educational administrators as well as the social obligations of our country are met, wherein the enhancement or empowerment of the individual competencies of the learners have been at the cost of all the requirements of others. And I think that's a very important thing, that learning is a lifelong process, not conditioned by a classroom, not conditioned by a textbook. And when you let the child enjoy his learning, he will open up and he will nurture his knowledge into skills and then to proficiency and competency. Now, we need to celebrate the child in this growth process. All that what we do is we compare, we denounce the child. I think in that process, the mindset, the so-called the mindset of the children is harmed. I think it's high time Indian education system gets more democratized, more free, and more accessible to whatever piece of knowledge the child learns. I think while the national policy talks about core subjects like mathematics, physics, chemistry being learned, I am not against that. But at the same time, whatever aptitude the child has, wherever he wants to acquire mastery, wherever he wants to acquire the skills, competencies, we need to encourage. I think that's a very important thing. Opening the Indian education system to pay to what you call optimistic learners, to passionate learners is the answer, I think, for the right time.
Okay, if I can actually, put all together and, come out with a statement. You're saying basically, competency-based learning is nothing but where, you empower students, provide them with a meaningful and positive learning environments and experiences. Learner is basically at the center. So, all the activities, all the engagements in the classroom should be around that learning process for the student. And definitely it will also emphasize real world application of knowledge, skills, and the authenticity of the learning experience itself. So if I'm correct in, just paraphrasing all your ideas, so this is what, comes into my mind. As educators, if you look at all of this, even from my, perspective, I wanted to understand, what do you believe are the enabling factors that allows students to gain an understanding and participate in the experiences of building their competencies? So what are those enabling factors that will allow students to gain that understanding? That yes.
Shall I go ahead? Yeah.
Yes, Vishnu.
Yeah.
Okay.
I loved what Bala sir said about enjoying learning. Now, it may sound like a very airy-fairy thing, but I think enjoying learning is at the heart of building competencies, because honestly, how is this competencies going to be built? Yes, the teacher is crucial because the teacher is engineering the environment, is presenting certain tasks, is modeling and explaining some things. But I think what is less clear sometimes is what is the student's work in learning. And if we can have some kind of clarity and consensus about what is the student's work in learning, then the student will certainly enjoy it and will build the competence, because the student is ultimately going to build the competence. And I think a good student is perhaps more important than a good teacher. Though we have a role in helping that good student to emerge, because if you're all the time saying, no, and creating a mindset about exams, then it doesn't work. So I'll just quickly mention a few things. Some of these things have already been mentioned by Rishi and Bala sir. So exploration. I think a lot of us do not realize. We think that we must first teach something and then we can ask children questions. But guess what? You can actually allow children to explore a lot of things before you actually teach them that thing. And it's much, much better once they've already explored it, right? Getting students to question. I'm amazed that even in 2022, we've been talking of 21st century skills, but I run these camps in GenWise, right? And there are so many children, when we ask them for feedback, the first thing they say is, I'm allowed to question, I'm allowed to ask questions. I mean, it shouldn't be the case, but it's actually quite a rare thing for a child to ask questions. Leave alone, and encouraging questioning outside of the syllabus. Yes, syllabus is important, curriculum is important, we have time constraints, but it sucks the life out of it. If you always have to talk only about syllabus, curriculum, it just sucks the life out of it, which is what Bala sir also has been talking about. The kind of questions the teacher asks, the teacher should not be scared to ask questions she cannot answer herself. Right? Because honestly, this is all very involved. Everything is very involved. I have a lot of doubts about 6th standard content all the time, right? So I think being able to ask these kind of questions, giving the process of answering more importance, and of course, there are activities, projects, so on. In fact, just to end my diatribe, last week I was in Manipal University. We had our camp, and there were 10, 12 of us teachers, and we went to the beach one day. And this was, in a narrow tongue kind of thing near the delta, near Manipal. We went, and then somebody saw a bridge and then said that, do you know that across the Amazon River, there are no bridges? And none of us knew the answer to that question. And we started discussing. We came up with many different ideas, which were partly correct, but the main reason was very interesting, which came out finally through discussion, was that it's such a crowded, dense rainforest that there are not many centers of economic activity on both sides. So, yeah, please, Rishi and Balasan.
Well, I think, Vishnu has really focused on the very important issue. To me, what is important is the idea of questioning what he said is very, very important. As a matter of fact, the fundamental requisite for acquisition of competency is to question. Then only you acquire from the knowledge, you introspect on the knowledge, you research on the knowledge, you acquire the skill, and then you build your competencies over that. So, the encouraging questions is one of the most important thing in a classroom, if you really want to have a competency enabling environment. Number two, the teacher should believe that the knowledge doesn't flow from him or her. I think we are now entering into the classroom that whatever I say is a piece of information. I think that approach has got to vanish, and it's time that we have got a participative learning process. I would call the teacher a co-learner in the classroom who constructs knowledge, who connects with the knowledge. We talk about constructivism, connectivism, all these are philosophies, but they are very practical things in the classroom. The teacher to put up a problem, to solve, and then interacts with the children, open up, and then find possibilities, as he rightly pointed out, the case of a bridge, right? I remember when I was a teacher, when I went for a program, they gave me an A4 sheet paper and said, make a bridge which will withstand maximum weight. I really did not know. None of the 40 teachers could find out how the bridge is built. We cross so many bridges a day. The question is, we did not think, because my teacher did not allow me to think. So what happens is, because my teacher doesn't allow me to think, I don't want my child to think. And even if the child wants to think, what happens is, I got to finish the syllabus, sit down. So the whole question of competency is that we want to finish the syllabus in October, conduct the examination once, twice, thrice. The whole idea of enjoying learning, the whole idea of experimenting learning is there. So if you want to enable competency-based learning in the classroom, number one, you should have textbooks, non-restrictive textbooks. You need learning should be open up to the opportunities for the children to go to the library, explore the knowledge, interact with the website. So many things over there. In other words, your teacher should be able to accept the child in terms of knowledge, our skills, and with their strengths and weaknesses. I think now to force a personality of the teacher in the classroom is one of the problems that we have. I think we are now moving towards schools being termed as knowledge caves, where people come and have a cup of coffee and discuss piece of knowledge and get back. That's going to be the future with all the learning coming through. And therefore, I must say that if you want enabling environment for the competency-based learning, the teacher should be a co-learner along with the children, and they should have enough of peer learning, right? And we should use the textbooks more like a, a runway for an aircraft to take off. The joy of the journey is to fly ahead. And that is what competency-based learning is about. I don't know how Rishi will react.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, to what Vishnu and Balasubramanian ji said, I mean, so what is it all leading us to is to ensure that there is the learner agency in place, right? Which is what is missing in our classrooms. Why don't we, as Vishnu was saying, we get this feedback that, oh, you allowed us to ask questions. I mean, which is just such a sad commentary in terms of otherwise what's happening in their classrooms. Why is that? That is because there is absolutely no learner agency. Now, if you actually go back to figure out why is there no learner agency, you also figure out that there is actually no teacher agency either. And, so there are these aspects that need to be adequately addressed for us to ensure that there is truly CBE. And in fact, where is it that we have CBE is where, in fact, teacher agency is there, where teachers are provided that autonomy. They're not, held so strictly onto that parameter of accountability, but they're provided that autonomy. And you see that learner agency is there. And that is where Balasubramanian ji was saying that, teachers also become co-learners. So when, you ensure that there is learner agency, then teachers also start thinking of themselves as well as learners. And as Vishnu was saying, then ask questions for which they don't know the answer, not scared to even ask those questions, right? So once you create that learner agency, everyone becomes a learner. And then there is this opportunity to co-learn, which is so very important. One of the crucial aspects that is missing from what we do in classrooms is that collaborative learning. We talk about peer learning. It just can't happen because, that prerequisition is completely missing. So yes, I mean, so these are, I mean, just to kind of, put together what Vishnu and Balasubramanian ji was saying, these prerequisites are completely missing across many of our schools and classrooms, which is why even when CBE is attempted, just because there is some kind of a mandate, it just doesn't fall into place. It doesn't work. And CBE is automatically happening where these things are in place. It doesn't require any kind of, mandate. Because this is precisely what educators would want. I mean, you will go and speak to any teacher. I mean, that's precisely what they would want in their classroom, but they cannot establish it because these prerequisites aren't there. And as Balasubramanian ji was saying, it's not there also because, we are driving them towards a certain goal, towards accomplishing the examination goals of having 10% results and, whatnot, right? So, I'll stop.
Okay. From exploration to the idea of questioning to knowledge scapes, so that is a new word which I've heard from you today, and from learner agency and teacher agencies in place. My next question, which is a continuation of the last question, is how should a teacher prepare to appreciate, understand, and also to learn the trade crafts necessary to become an expert practitioner of CBL? What are those important preparatory levels?
Well, can I take it up first?
Yes, sir, please.
As a teacher, because though I might have been in different positions, fundamentally, I consider myself as a teacher and continue to be a teacher. So I am going to speak the language of a teacher. Now, I think the most important thing is that in a world where knowledge dynamics is very fast, where the irrelevance of knowledge is dominating over the relevance of knowledge, all the degree that what we have, all the knowledge that we have acquired over a period of time is becoming absolutely irrelevant. And a teacher, good teacher, needs to understand and evaluate himself or herself in that context. When I was a teacher in the early 60s, early 70s, probably revising a textbook took 10 years. After that, when I became a principal of a school, I found it was getting changed in 7 years. After that, when I became a joint secretary, I found it was changing in 5 years. When I became a director, I introduced a frontline curriculum where the curriculum changed in 2 years. Now I do not know under how much of compulsion you have to change the curriculum, because the speed of irrelevance of knowledge is haunting us. A school has absolutely no other opportunity but to stay relevant to that. Therefore, a good teacher should remember that a postgraduate degree and a B.Ed degree is not the end all of education, probably is a start point of education. One of the most important tragedies which I find today, that teachers of time, I'm sorry, I'm not finding fault with them, I'm part of them, but the fact is that we have closed our own doors for learning. So long a teacher doesn't learn himself or herself and stay relevant and current in a world which is fast, I think the gap between the teacher and the learner and will continue. The teacher will not be able to motivate the children, leave alone enabling them to competency. What was a competency in 60s when I taught? What is a competency at this particular point of time? They are different. So I need to equip myself to stay relevant to the kind of competencies required. And therefore, to me, the most essential aspect for a good professional teaching and to be an enabler of competency-based learning is I am current and I am competent. These two are the mantras for teaching.
Nice one, Balasubramanianji. I'll take a slightly different position here in terms of trying to figure out as to how do we, get the teachers to do what Balasubramanianji was, suggesting, because that's really what is required, right? And I think from a systemic point of view, when you look at there are just too many things holding back a teacher, like how Vishnu was talking about exploration, right? Allowing children to explore. Now, do we allow our teachers to explore? Why are there just such strict guidelines? And I've seen that it's not a bad idea to have a lesson plan. We all need to have a lesson plan because we need to broadly know in which direction we want to take the class in. But then going in the middle of a class and holding a teacher accountable to the lesson plan is snatching away her agency. Because in the class, there are so many things that would have happened, and the teacher needs to have the autonomy to take the class in the direction in which the learners want it to go. And but then you go in there as administrator and you tell the teacher that the lesson plan is not adhered to, and give her, and there is a dressing down that happens there, which is what scares teachers to explore, and obviously not allow hence children to explore. So, this issue that is there in our system is something that we'll have to work on. Of course, there are policies which say the right things, but when the system looks at operationalizing these policies, usually they only look for where accountability can be traced and implemented, rather than all the other aspects. So it's always this piecemeal implementation of policy, which brings a bad name to even the policy that would be there. And that I think is something also very crucial for us to fix. No easy answers there, but then that has to be fixed for us to enable the teachers to become what Bala sir was saying.
Thanks, Rishi. I just wanted to quickly respond to what you said. I'm all for that. The question of what is called the lesson plan. What 40 years, 50 years before, how we drew, probably that was okay for the time. But today, when I go to a couple of schools over there and find there is a learning engagement plan, I think that is what is necessary. A lesson plan is not something where you are to be dictated second by second, and it's a scheduled program to happen. That really kills creativity. I think it's high time the heads of institutions give the kind of necessary operational freedom for the teachers to innovate and to be contextual to a classroom, because the same topic you could do it differently to two classrooms and you will find the contexts are different. I think that's what the teachers need to get. If I think, thank you for that wonderful idea.
Yes, thanks.
Vishnu, your opinion?
Yeah, I actually agree very much with what Rishi said, and I want to talk for a few minutes about this. Yes, certainly a teacher can do a few things, and maybe we'll talk about that later in the Q&A. But I think what the teacher can do, in spite of the current system, we are asking too much of the teacher. Maybe, because why should she make such heroic efforts? Because everything is conspiring to actually put you in a different direction. A simple example of like the cent % results, so on, like back in 1984, when I finished my 10th standard, I got 83% marks. I was in the Delhi board. Examination was conducted by CBSE. I think Bala sir must have been the director at that time. So I was 11th in Delhi with 83%. I don't know where you will be with 83% today. So the reason I'm sharing this is, unfortunately, instead of fixing the system, people fudge the measure. So what happens, you say, oh, okay, now, everybody has passed and it is 95% and this thing. So instead of actually fixing the issue, and then I can tell you, very briefly, when in my earlier organization, there was a school which had bought a learning product, and they wanted to discontinue this learning product. And I went in there to talk to them that, why are you discontinuing this product? It was a math learning product. And then they said that, no, but our children used to get 85, 90, 80% in math. Now they're getting 65, 70%. But then I investigated further, because this learning product had a lot of deeper math questions, which was testing conceptual understanding. The teachers had changed the question papers. They were testing real understanding, and the things came down. So I see that as a failure on the part of the leadership. So what I should be telling my teachers, and well, let's have transparency. We don't have to, say that we are top of the pops and 95, 100, 80, whatever. Let us face the reality of where we are. There is nothing wrong. There is no pressure. Let's enjoy learning and we will get there. So I think one of the issues with educational administration has to, I work for an assessment company and I support assessment. But if you are looking at getting some end goals, learning goals, improvement in learning outcomes in too much of a hurry, learning levels will improve. It will take 3, 4, 5 years, whatever. So, but if that becomes your immediate outcome, people will game the system, right? So, and I'm seeing people gaming in the name of CBE. There is, to put it bluntly, a lot of nonsense going on. There are robots out there and, Arduino microcontrollers and children who don't understand anything of what that is going on. It is all a dog and pony show. So honestly, I believe many people, school leaders and even, higher level educational administrators, the board level SCRT, I honestly, I don't think they trust the process. I don't think they trust that if children enjoy, they will actually learn, right? I've seen this. I did this 2.5-year ABL study. So the best classrooms where the spirit was retained was actually when people trusted the process. Because what will happen in this is sometimes the child will go away from the class, sometimes he will lie down in the class, and we are so anxious as a nation. We are a very, very anxious nation, and we are also not at all transparent. If we don't do well in PISA, we think, we will try to blame the PISA. So my one sentence advice to school heads or HODs who are on this thing is, you need to allow teachers to fail, explore, take their time. Most of them will do fantastically well. Just give them some time and don't have these, Rome was not built in a day. And I think the lack of transparency, patience, and the lack of trusting the process is the biggest challenge. I can share with teachers what they can do within their circle of influence while these things change, but to me, that's a smaller issue.
Okay. I think contextualizing the knowledge was a very eye-opening statement. Current and competent was again a very eye-opening statement. Sir, you said it is a mantra. I think we should all be, very current and very competent, when we're trying to get into a classroom. Accountability and policy, yes, how these also play, the dynamics of these two also play a lot in the classrooms. I like the idea of learning engagement plan than lesson plans, because that gives a very different, perspective to the entire learning, outcomes, in a classroom. Of course, innovation is something which we all, want to do, when we get into a classroom. Even as a teacher, I always looked at things and, wanted to bring something new to every classroom, when I enter into it. So it's interesting to know how, a teacher can really appreciate, understand, and, also learns, certain trade crafts like this. My one more, I think Sir mentioned about NEP 2020 while in his conversation, Bala sir mentioned it. So I would like ask you a question on this. NEP actually lays special emphasis on building student competencies. Okay, and I'm sure Rishi will agree with me because Rishi Azim Premji University is actually creating a framework for many of the CBSE, curriculums, in English and Hindi and math and science. So addressing especially their learning dispositions. So what are you recommending? What are your recommendations for schools and its leaders as they prepare to align with the tenets of NEP 2020, especially pertaining to building student competencies? So
You wanted Bala sir to go first? I thought
you can
Dr.
go ahead,
Nagamani.
Rishi, you can go ahead, yes.
Bala sir, you were about to say something. Sorry, I interrupted.
No. Go ahead. I would love to listen to you.
Thank you. Well, so I think, going with what Vishnu was saying, one will have to step back. I mean, we are, running, I would say may not be like a headless chicken, because you are running on the path and with some goal and, pretty much like a horse with blinkers, right? If not like a headless chicken, which finally turns out to be like a headless chicken sooner than later. But, we all need to step back. I mean, what are we running towards? And because we're running with, at such pace and with that very narrow aim of, wanting to achieve something at those summative board exams, we are leaving aside everything that education stands for.
Right.
If you just look at what aims of education talks about, I mean, where is it that we have gone, and what are the aims that we laid down for ourselves, for our education system? So that, I think, is a very crucial thing for all of us to do. It's not easy, obviously, because if, for instance, the society is gauging success based on what your school has done at the board, it's obviously something that the school would be concerned about, because particularly the private schools, this so-called success viewed from the society is also a part of their identity building, brand building, and all that. So it's not something that can easily be done. But then that's the reason why NEP talks about it, not just about talking about competencies, but it's talking about a complete regulatory as well as curricular reform, which will align to ensuring that there is CBE. And that's the reason over a period of time, one is looking at, having board exams which are not of the current kind, which will allow for CBE to be in place, so that there is a lot more of the self-based assessments that can be self-paced assessments that can be in place, multiple assessments that can be in place. So these are the other aspects in NEP 2020, because NEP is a very comprehensive document. So when you look at competency based education mentioned, it also talks about what is it that needs to be done with the current teachers, what is it that needs to be done with the teacher education system, what is it that needs to be done with assessments, and what is it that needs to be done in a higher education, because finally it all also goes in there, right? So in NEP, you will see that all these linkages are there. But again, I mean, it's a policy, lot would change by the time things are being implemented. And that's the reason why it is important for all of us educators, be it as school leaders, teachers, to step back, use the policy, and use our aims of education as the foundational document based on which we figure out as to what is it that our children need today, that the unknown tomorrow is something that they can face with the kind of competencies that are required. That's something that is very crucial for us. That's the reason why we need to step back. Otherwise, we're pushing them through this treadmill and through this narrow funnel. When we are increasingly realizing that tomorrow is unknown and something that it's becoming more and more unpredictable. So for that kind of a future, we are pushing them through a funnel wherein we are giving them only X number of skills and thinking that will do. The problem is that will not do. It's a human brain that will do. to tackle that unknown and unpredictable future, it is the human brain that needs to be relied upon. And all that we need to do in education is to equip our children to optimize the human brain that we have. And that really is what we need to do in our education. And that's the reason we need to step back, because currently we do not optimize our brain. We just, channelize it in a certain direction, and we are trying to measure the success. So I'll pause here.
I think Rishi has touched a very, very important aspect of the process of education. I think so much of research has gone into the neurocognitive sciences in the last one decade, when I find that most of the philosophies that we have been practicing and implementing are not tuned to the way the brain functions. As a matter of fact, a very fundamental statement in neurocognitive research is that there is nothing called teaching. You cannot teach people because the brain learns. And therefore, if anybody says I'm trying to teach, it's maybe an overstatement of what they are doing. There is no guarantee that learning is going to take place. And that really leads to what is called freedom to learn, right? The freedom to learn is very important in a school situation. And I think one of the greatest threats for the freedom to learn, it has got to be tackled by, a concerted synergetic effect of many stakeholders. It cannot be done with that. First, the mindset of the school leadership has got to change, that this is a place where a learning opportunity is given, and my job is to create a learning environment, and every learner has a right to learn his own way, his own method, by his own choice. I think that is very fundamental to competency-based learning. Teachers should think that I am not here for teaching a textbook, but I'm here for facilitating a learning to happen, in which the child will take the concept and analyze and introspect, research, and then he will make his own decisions. That's the way the teachers need to change. And the authoritarian model and the machine model production of the industrial model of classrooms have got to change. That's number two from the teacher's side. Parents' side, I think it's high time parents are thinking that I'm not here to produce an engineer or a doctor or anything. Basic objective is my child has got to be a good human being, whatever he is or whatever it is, and therefore he should be a good learner, lifelong learner, and should acquire transferable skills so that he can face life at any point of time with the kind of skills that is required. I think so. We have the school leadership, we have the parent, we have got the teacher, all the three triangles, and in the center is the child, where he will be nurtured and facilitated, and he will blossom to be a competent individual, if all of us support. I think all that and I go back to what Vishnu said, we need to have a change in the mindset. As one who has lived right from Kothari Commission report, I've gone through almost everything. Nobody has ignored competency. Every policy, as a matter of fact, education is only a process of empowering people. Empowerment is competency. And therefore, let's not say that only this policy has said. It has been our philosophy for the last 50 years. One thing is that we have not addressed to the core issues because we set wrong priorities. With the new policy, I think we should be sensible enough to understand that education is a facilitative process and not authoritarian process of delivering information. I think that's important.
So Nagamani, can I share a couple of things?
Yes, please, Vishnu.
What Bala sir and Rishi say is very instructive. So I want to speak a little bit about certain practical things, because I don't want the teachers and the principals on this conversation to think that, how does change happen? So we have actually, as Gen Ys, we've been working with a school in Bangalore over the last couple of years with about 50 odd teachers in math and now starting to work in science. And we've actually started to see a lot of good things happening. So I want to talk about that in a little bit of a meta way. What are the 4 things we are trying to do there? And I do think a lot of So while the teacher is at the center, I think a lot of support is needed for the teacher. Because honestly, when even when I sort of have tried to teach a course, say a 2-week course in a residential summer camp, I've had to prepare 3-4 months for it. I've had to consult 20 experts on it. And I'm teaching people where, there is no pressure about what will they do in the exam and so on. The teacher has far more constraints than what, say, I face. So there are 4 things we are doing out here, which is starting to, I think, work. Mindset, of course, we have to work on the mindset because it's not very clear or obvious what we are trying to do. Because either you are in one extreme of being very sort of go with the textbook and the sums, or you're on the other extreme of being very superficial and showing to the world that you're doing some fancy stuff. But you actually need to have rigor in, say, extending the school subject and so on. So mindset is, of course, one thing. And often it is mistakenly understood. What do we mean by CBE, right? The surface thing is there, the depth is not there. So while the mindset is important, the mindset will take time. We have to always talk about mindset, but I have found from my personal experience that ultimately, however cynical we may be, most teachers are coming in because definitely they want to be with children, they want to teach. 90% of teachers are there because of that. They may have their own compulsions, but they're there because of that. So when they see the spark in the eyes of students, when they see students happy, coming up, asking questions, that creates a virtuous cycle. But unfortunately, the teacher doesn't know the first step to take in doing that. So let me talk about, 3 kinds of things we've done here. One is to provide resources. These resources have to be very, very simple. I cannot tell the teacher that you read elementary mathematics by Van der Waal and then, look at Van Heel level of geometric thought and do it. It's not going to happen, right? She's already so busy with so many things. But if I know all of that and I can extract that into, like, when you are already teaching this geometry class, why don't you maybe do something like this? And it is like somebody said, a learning engagement plan. It's not a lesson plan minute by minute. Or why don't you even wait for 2 minutes after you ask a question? Just wait. Don't give an answer. So we have found that giving a lot of small usable resources like this has actually worked wonders. Yes, unpacking the curriculum, we used a framework called understanding by design. What is a priority in the curriculum? So that has also helped. We had to be patient. So for the first 8-10 months, we thought nothing is happening, right? And then we were surprised that suddenly, so much is happening. And a lot of credit to the school. They were very mature. They told us that, hey, don't get impatient. Just be with it. But I don't think the teachers by themselves would have done this because it was too much of a task. So we needed, for example, multiplication is, say, not repeated addition. Now, this is a very subtle thing, but we needed someone who's really, really good at math to connect, make that relevant for teachers, right? Because you will find people saying, hey, this is not right, what you're teaching is not right, and that doesn't work with teachers. You have to make it relevant, you have to get into that. So a lot of stuff which help us structure. Structure could be as simple as, what do you discuss? What do teachers discuss when they get together? How often do they get together, right? What is the report after that meeting? In fact, there were some structures we had to throw away because actually people have this idea that more is better sometimes in teacher monitoring or teacher education. So there used to be a 30-item classroom observation checklist. We told them to throw it off. We said, look at only 3 things. Because if you're putting 30 things, everybody is going to sit around ticking and crossing and 4 and 5, and it's just going to hide things, right? So we worked on structure, resources, and skills. And a lot of it is working. I think, and the one thing I want to say is I'm actually, and I'm being a little harsh here. I know that the CBSE is doing great work and the Sahodaya schools are doing great work. But I'm actually little disappointed with the extent of collaboration between schools. And the reason this is relevant is because it takes a village to raise a child. When you're talking of competency-based learning, I need that scientist, I need that plumber, I need that historian, I need that journalist. There is no way that a teacher can herself bring all this competency because you don't know enough about that domain to make it alive. You need the practitioner, the expert, and so on. And a very effective way of bringing them all together is like the NEP 2020 school complex idea. Though the NEP 2020 envisages it more as a larger schools with more infrastructure getting together, I would extend that to call it a community learning hub. I would say that if say, for example, 10 schools in South Bangalore who have a reasonably similar value system say, hey, that let's get together and let's work together on teacher professional development. And let us, allow teachers to observe each other's classrooms and do this thing. If we are less defensive and, just willing to collaborate. Actually, the funny thing is most of the answers are already there within schools and with teachers. We are failing to shine light on the bright spots, have a conversation around that, and institutionalize that. We are thinking that someone from outside will come and do it, but already people inside know the answers and we have to bring that up.
Great. I think that's a very important.
So I think defining the learning goals and what NEP is actually talking about, and at the same time talking about the perspectives of teacher. I think at length we have been deliberating about the perspectives and planning that needs to be undertaken by schools at every level, both for leaders and practitioners. So my question to you is, planning that needs to be undertaken at the school level by the leaders or by the practitioners in developing an ecosystem where CBL can manifest and thrive, how would it make a difference in the lives of students, especially when it comes to making them lifelong learners?
Well, I think it's very simple, Nagamani. You see, everything in the school system influences the learner, right? So
Yes,
the question is that a school in very short, put one sentence, I think it's high time every school focuses on developing a positive learning culture. I'm not talking in terms of, whether it's a KG class or 12 class. No, all that school today, we don't talk of learning cultures in schools. I think it's time that the head of the institution and the ambience works together to develop a learning culture which is positive, integrating, and enriching. All that. That's all.
okay.
I'll just quickly respond to that. Some of it we had talked about exploration, student questioning, and so on. So there is this person called Paul Graham who is, he funds innovative companies, and he once made a comment that these very bright people from Harvard and Stanford and wherever, they would come to him. I'm forgetting the name of his organization where, they go through a process of, selecting the most innovative companies, then they help them get venture funding. So these very bright people, the question they were asking him was, how can we get money from a venture capitalist? How can we get money? They were not asking, how do we create value? How do we create value for the customer with our product? They were not asking that question. And he thought a lot about it, then why the hell are people doing this? And then he realized, and he said that all their life they're used to cracking exams. So it's coming back again and again to this. So how will it help the learner? He will actually not be thinking about the grade and the exam. So I will tell you, so I went to IIT Madras, and in my first year, I was, in the physics lab, and V equal to IR, Ohm's law, I was drawing that thing. After 5 readings, I said, it's going to be a linear thing. So I fudged the remaining 3 readings. And later my marks were cut because at higher, voltages, it is an S-shaped curve. But this will not happen in an undergraduate American university. This is standard, right? You're not surprised. 80% of students would beat the system. But if in a good, decent university, a student, if he did not get the reading, first of all, he would not fudge. And if he got something unexpected, he will report it truthfully. He will go back. And on a Saturday, he will come and do it. So basically, in one word, if learning can stop being a farce, which is trying to show someone, and if you're getting into real learning, that's the world of difference. It's a world of difference.
And yeah, and I mean, we owe it to our children's future that we establish CBE, because otherwise we're not really equipping them with the kind of skill sets that they would require in the future. So it's really very important that we equip them appropriately, and not the way we were all equipped to probably just go get a job, because that's not the future that most of our children are going to be in.
In fact, Rishi, I think it's going the opposite way, right? While I agree that we probably were educated for a job, at least in our generation, this the faddism has gotten worse, because you needed to get old to make money and bring value. Now, unfortunately, because there are 25-year-old and 30-year-old millionaires and billionaires, this actually learning is a slow, painstaking process. It takes time to understand and do things. So that has created further problems. So in fact, I think learning was better 30, 40 years ago and is actually worse now. So
I think, Caesar, we should not equate earnings and learning at par. Both are more or less like parallel lines. Learning could happen effectively without earnings, and earning could happen without learnings, and both of them need not be supported by the competency. I think competency-based learning is basically a social enrichment for a national development. I think that's how I look upon that.
Thank you so much. Before I come to the concluding, remarks, I would request all the participants to, kindly type your questions in the chat box so that we can, ask the panelists the same.
You can collect those questions.
Yeah, we can collect those questions. Yes. Sir, I have a question here. Okay, this is. The question is from one of the teachers. She's saying, what kind of a classroom culture should be in place for effective competency-based learning?
It is very difficult to answer this question because learning culture is developed in situ, in context, in a school. So unless you know the social environment, geographical environment, it is not correct to advise that this should be a classroom learning culture. And even within a school, the classroom learning culture might vary from one to the other. That's why I talked about a learning culture rather than the classroom culture at point of time. And I think these are points which the school now should go back, sit down and brainstorm, and they should think what they should do in their context. I hope others agree on that.
So, Rishi, you have a view on that?
Yeah, completely with Bala sir on that. And and for that, obviously, I mean, for all of us to believe in ourselves, and also, ensure that we seriously take lifelong learning as something that, we imbibe, and all the aspects that come in as lifelong learners. Once we imbibe that, then we are on that journey, and that's the kind of journey that we will have to be to have CBE in place. Because once all of us consider ourselves as lifelong learners, now whether I'm coming into grade 1 or whether I'm a 30-year in service teacher, I'm on this journey of exploration. I mean, I would like to go back and tie the loop with what Vishnu began. It was, appropriate for what we were discussing. It's just this very simple thing. And that's the reason, as Bala sir is saying, you can't have a template for this. How do you ensure each one of us is on this explorative journey, right? And that will bring in the aspect of having a self-paced journey. That will bring in, and hence, assessments that will adhere to that. So it's CCE and not some kind of a summative. So all that kind of aligns to these some very, very foundational principles, one can call them, but you can't really have a template.
Can't really have a template, yes. I think there is one more question from one of the participants. How should parents be made to understand that CBL is the new normal, as they still want teachers to give unit tests, more tests on theory or mathematics and so on? So how should parents, be made to understand about CBL? Yes, as a tutor.
Again, Nagamani, I think, it is too generic to give an answer for that, because a parent means if you have got a type 3 city, type 2 city, type 1 city, the parental expectations, social equities, and other things will all be different. So you want that's why you got a school leadership which has got to understand what is that my parental requirements are, and do that. And I think the process of educating the parents is the responsibility of the school situation. Every school should have at least twice in a year a school parent interaction program, not to celebrate for a cup of tea, but just to say that's something to explain to them the dynamics of education. I think that's not happening at this point of time. I think educating the parent is going to be much more difficult than educating the child. I think that's prerequisite for transformation of education in this country.
I just want to. Yes, sorry.
Go ahead.
Yes.
Yeah. So I do think that parent education is an extremely important thing, and schools need to do this consistently and patiently, because in my experience, a lot of parents do come around. Yes, as Bala sir said, the social context is important, right? So somewhere it may be extremely important for students to pick up English or do well in the board exam and so on, and it may be important. But in a lot of situations, all that will happen over a period of time. And I do think, and so how do you educate parents? One is, of course, you talk about things, but the most effective thing I have seen, first of all, most of us as adults grossly underestimate children. So the thing I've seen working best with parents is when you do things with children, you can competency-based learning, they do things, and when parents come and see them presenting it, their jaw drops. They say, oh my God, my child can actually do all this. So once they start seeing that, the confidence, the way they are doing it, slowly they will, be more convinced. So the thing is, you will have to show some small successes in parent education. There is another question, maybe we'll come to that later if there is time. One teacher sent to me on direct message, but yeah.
I would just like to add to what Vishnu said with an anecdotal evidence, from Karnataka, when Nalikali, the activity-based learning. Yeah. So when it was implemented, initially it was a pilot, so it was easier to win over the parents. But then once it was expanded to 4,000 schools, murmurs started. Once it was expanded across to all the 40,000 government schools, there was a lot of pushback from parents. And rightly so, because for them, the aspiration was that factory-based private school, right, which they cannot afford to, but most of the middle class sending their children. And here you have the government school where, activity-based learning is happening. Children are thoroughly enjoying what they're doing, but then it doesn't seem like learning. There is no really textbook. They're just cards and story, charts and things like that. So there was a lot of apprehension, and hence a pushback saying that you are making our children guinea pigs, and this is not the way school education happens. We want what we see there in that close by private school. So the department had to do a lot of work with the parents, and they did an amazing job. Initially there was this whole Nalikali Kosha, or the cell, which all the while was on the ground, and with teachers who were initially won over, because teachers themselves had apprehension and they were won over, and along with them it was a successful communication with parents. And as Vishnu said, the children were asked to go and showcase things. So for instance, through this activity-based learning, they learned a song and they were asked to just go and sing it to the parents. And that was the kind of homework, right? Because the whole curriculum and pedagogy shifted from just out of a textbook learning methodology to doing things in the classroom. And then the homework was about going and showcasing it, in their homes. And so this started indicating very clearly to these parents that their children are actually not just having fun, which is how they had perceived the activity-based learning, but they were actually learning things. And then there were these melas that were done, math mela, where children showcase as to how they've learned measurements, how they've learned estimation, and simple things like this. And so this finally won over the parents, and Nalikali was able to sustain itself, and not in the at the level at which one would have liked to see across all schools, but then 25 years later we still have Nalikali as the primary approach. So just wanted to add to that. It's very important to show the parents as to what their children are capable of doing. And this is there if you go to the most elite of schools, the IB schools, where obviously competency-based education is the platform. Project-based learning is a very crucial component, right? And so for PBL, the way it is then showcased is that parents are invited to those galleries. And so it's important that one does that. And as Bala sir saying, and it's the responsibility of the school to educate the parents. And you can't get pushed back by them and say that, okay, we'll fall in line, we'll do what you want because, the bread and butter is from you. I mean, then we are not doing education. We just have a retail shop.
Exactly. I think I'll take one last question from the audience. There is a teacher who is asking us, when online classes started, we were thrown into a lion's cage. Inside a lion's cage. But when we learn to fight by acquiring technical skills, but CBE looks altogether a different ball game. So how do I, as a teacher or as a practitioner, identify a particular skill of a child and then encourage it to learn? I think this is a very individualistic question as to how you can identify what is the need of the child and then encourage it to learn. So how does this kind of skill building happen in a classroom?
I think it's a very, very difficult question to be answered by any of us. I mean, personally, I'm sorry if I'm including that, because the good teacher in the classroom sees the child bubbling with skills and proficiencies consequent to the acquisition of knowledge that they have. The moment the teacher is able to identify a child is exhibiting skills and acquiring proficiencies, then the teacher should understand that he is now progressing to the level of competency. And that has to be done only by the teacher in the classroom. Even a principal cannot do that. A teacher in the classroom is the most, rather the right person to identify the skill and enhance.
Vishnu, your last words on this?
Yeah, I'll say something. There's one more question somebody else has asked. Maybe I'll quickly address that also. Yes, so I think it's a good question. How do you identify skills? So first of all, I think the way to identify what a child's qualities are or what is the level of skill and so on. And I'm not talking just about a particular topic, right? It could be that do you listen to your peers? Do you collaborate? Do you, ask questions? Are you able to do something with your hands? And a bunch of things. So by putting children in different situations, and I would encourage CLLE to do a session on learning tasks. I think people do not understand what a learning task is. So this idea is there that we will teach and the child will absorb, but actually a lot of learning happens through carefully designed learning tasks. And in these tasks, if you observe children, you will learn a lot about them. Yeah, maybe there are ways to tabulate it, look at it. But the first is, it's like I cannot say that a child has a talent for music if I never ask him to sing, or if I don't put him in front of a piano, I don't know how it's going to happen. So first I have to be able to, like, I think the Montessori setup is a great thing, right? Where you have all these materials carefully designed waiting for you and you do these things. And a very quick response to the other question, which was, can you throw light?
Vishnu, I didn't touch that question simply because it spoke about formal assessment processes.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I don't talk
Otherwise,
much.
if you want to go ahead and answer that question, you can go ahead.
Yeah.
I would like to ask Rishi to, give me a few things, his views on the last question, and then you can take that question.
Sure. No, I just want to talk about that because my experience has been that. So first of all, I think 80% of assessment, it can be formal, but I think it can be formative and continuous. And when I have tried to create such assessments or create learning tasks, like I was mentioning previously, I have found that the best ones, I can't make out what is a learning task and what is an assessment. It just, it's very blurred. When you do it really well, and it takes a lot of effort. It sometimes takes me 1 year to come up with one decent thing. But so I would say that there definitely can be flexibility. The challenge is in coming up with challenges, designing a learning task where you can observe multiple things. But I can share, if I'm going to share my email ID out here, and if people want specific examples, please write to me and I can share you lesson plans and worksheets and things like that. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Vishnu.
Sure.
Rishi, if your last views on the previous question.
On the assessment flexibility, which one are you?
No, I am talking about the before one where, they were talking about how a teacher can recognize,
Right.
the exact skill which the child needs, and how does she encourage that child to groom in that skill?
Right. Again, I think Bala sir already has responded to that. See, it's the teacher, right? And we all know whether we have a class of 10, we have a class of 30, we know as to which direction our children are progressing. And there are different, different ways in which different strategies that are there, which I think, teachers would be able to pick to choose or to identify as to what is it that you would want to do with each of your children. So, for me, when I used to do a lot of workshops with children, which I've not done now for many years, I used to use worksheets a lot. And, with broad generic questions, which would give me a very good idea as to what is, a child thinking. So I would have a very good idea of what my 20-25 children are thinking on a particular aspect. And that gives me enough insight in terms of, what is it that I need to do now with each of my children. So this way there are, very many different ways. Many teachers use a small little notebook to kind of keep noting down things that, they observe on a daily basis in the class, and over, a week or fortnight, they will have a fair idea as to in which direction, child is going. And then obviously, we need to make space for all this. And so teachers will require this space for a one-on-one, at least a 5-minute one-on-one with her children. So, these are the different things that teachers will have to do. Schools will have to ensure that space is provided for the teachers. And hence, it is so important not to cram teachers with one class after another. Those are hence, the things that will have to change for CBE to be in place, because for CBE to be in place, all this is important. This question is very important that ma'am has asked, how do I look at each of my children? And for that, she requires a space, and the institutions will have to provide that space. So timetabling will have to be such that the teacher need not have to do this, post school hours or coming over on a Sunday, but it will have to be accommodated in a manner that, it's done during her work hours. So yeah, these are the things that will have to be done at an institutional level. Hopefully, policy will do by providing it some space at a systemic level, but all of us will really have to work towards ensuring this.
Yes. Thank you so much. I think due to the constraints of time, I would not be able to take more questions. When I look back at my notes, I think I have quite a number of, perspectives which has been discussed today, from retrospection to, how holistic education can, bring in change, or even integrating multiple, subjects together, or the knowledge dynamics, or even, fudging the measure. And I think if I look at all the benefits of what CBL can actually offer, is it definitely integrates higher order thinking. That is something which I also observed. And there are a few things which I also observed was how what happens in school also percolates to higher education. And from higher education, it also percolates to, their employability and daily life. So how skills can be, enhanced from, at a very young age from, competency-based learning. And of course, 21st century skills is something which is very, very relevant, and NEP continuously talks about it. So how does CBL actually enhance acquisition of critical 21st century skills in the learners is also something very relevant, which I, got to know from this discussion. One more important aspect which I understood was that you have to define the learning outcomes. That's very important under CBL. And yes, definitely that will increase curiosity, objectivity, creativity, and definitely bring in that scientific temper in children. And what is more important is how schools will help children to develop cognitive capabilities, so that, the learner outcomes are, whatever learner outcomes we're expecting becomes true. So thank you so much to all the panelists for sharing your intellectual wisdom with us. It was a really, really enriching experience, because the amount of, if you look at my notes, I have around 5-6 pages of notes which I have written down, and it's really interesting to understand more about CBL. We at CLLE would like to take this opportunity to thank all the panelists once again for accepting our invitation to be part of the panel and share their intellectual wisdom with everyone. Thank you so much, Mr. Vishnu and Bala sir and Rishi. Thank you so much.
Thank you, all of
My
you
pleasure.
enjoyed.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.